The river ran silver under the pale light of a full moon, its surface eerily still, reflecting the skeletal outlines of the bridge. Captain Elena Ramirez stood at the edge, scanning the dark horizon. The bridgehead was critical, a narrow choke point controlling troop movements and supply lines. If it fell to the enemy, the entire flank of her battalion would be exposed. Tonight, they would hold this bridge at all costs. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the strap of her medkit. Years of combat experience had taught her that nerves were a weapon as sharp as a rifle. They could betray the unprepared or fuel the focused. She inhaled deeply, tasting the cold, damp air that carried hints of river mud and gunpowder from previous skirmishes upstream. Her dark eyes flicked along the planks of the bridge. Soldiers were stationed along its length, alert and tense, rifles resting against barricades, eyes straining to penetrate the fog that hugged the riverbanks. She moved quietly among them, checking positions, distributing supplies, and quietly observing. Sergeant Halloran, her second-in-command, was packing near the center barricade, muttering under his breath as he inspected the sandbags. "They'll come sooner than we think," he whispered, though Elena had already noticed it herself. The snapping of a twig upstream made her freeze. Instinctively, she scanned the darkness. A shadow shifted, then vanished behind a line of trees. Enemy scouts, perhaps. She couldn't be sure. "Elena," Halloran murmured, his voice low, almost a growl, "you think it's quiet, too quiet." She didn't answer immediately. The night carried no wind, no distant artillery, no birdsong, just the river's quiet hiss. That stillness was unnatural. She nodded slowly. "Stay alert. Trust your instincts. We've trained for this," she said, trying to calm both herself and her soldiers. Despite her words, her pulse throbbed in her ears. Every bridge, every choke point she had ever defended carried a memory of fear, of failure narrowly avoided. Tonight, she was not just a nurse. She was the lifeline for the men and women depending on her. If she faltered, if the enemy found a gap, it would be catastrophic. Her gaze fell to the medkit slung over her shoulder. It contained the tools of survival, not just medicine. Tourniquets, bandages, hemostatic gauze, morphine, splints, each item a potential difference between life and death. She had treated broken bones in the middle of artillery barrages, patched holes in soldiers' arms from shrapnel, and held men alive who had no reason to survive. And yet, tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air, a premonition that this night would test everything she had learned. Movement flickered across the bridgehead, a soldier shifting nervously, the flash of a rifle strap. Elena's eyes narrowed. She approached Private Jensen, a young recruit barely out of training who was gripping his weapon so tightly that his knuckles were white. "Relax your shoulders, Jensen. Eyes sharp, yes. Fear sharp, no. Keep breathing," she whispered. He nodded, swallowing hard, trying to mimic the composure he saw in her face. The night stretched on, each minute a drawn-out eternity. The river below gurgled, carrying reflections of moonlight and broken shadows. Elena walked along the edge, listening, feeling the vibrations of distant artillery through her boots. Somewhere upstream, a branch snapped sharply, too deliberate to be random. She froze, scanning the darkness with a practiced eye. Her hand rested on her sidearm, a comforting weight against her hip. The soldiers watched her. Their morale, fragile as it was, drew strength from her presence. Halloran joined her at the center of the bridge, motioning toward the eastern embankment. "I don't like it. Not a single bird, not a single sound, and the river's like glass. It's wrong." Elena didn't reply immediately. Instead, she surveyed the fog rolling across the surface of the water. In that pale, shifting light, the river seemed to become an abyss. "It's always like this before they strike," she murmured. Her voice was soft but carried a weight of authority. "And we'll be ready. Every barricade, every rifle, every medkit we'll hold." She crouched briefly beside a pile of sandbags, checking splints and bandages. She envisioned what might come. Sudden gunfire, enemy soldiers emerging from the fog, mortars crashing nearby, cries of pain. Her mind worked in scenarios, calculating where the first attack would land, how to position medics, how to triage injuries efficiently. Every detail mattered. Every second could save lives. As the night deepened, the first faint sounds of distant movement reached her ears, soft, deliberate, too controlled for random wildlife. Alina stiffened. Somewhere in the shadows, the enemy moved. Scouting, probing, testing their defenses. She signaled to Halloran, who nodded grimly. "Stay ready," she said to the men, her voice firm. Alina returned to her patrol along the bridge. Moonlight glinted off rifles, helmet edges, and her own medkit strap. The river below whispered like a silent warning. Every step was measured, every glance calculated. She knew that soon chaos would erupt across the bridge, shattering the stillness. But she was ready, she had to be. Lives depended on her courage, her focus, and her ability to remain calm when everything around her descended into fire and fury. For now, though, the world held its breath with her. The calm before the storm stretched into eternity, but Alina Ramirez stood unwavering, a sentinel in the silver night. Soon the enemy would come, and when they did, she would be ready to hold the bridge and the lives of her soldiers with everything she had. The silence shattered like glass. A sharp crack echoed from the tree line upstream, followed by the distant patter of footsteps against the wet earth. Alina's instincts screamed that the enemy had arrived. She dove behind a barricade as a rifle's flash cut through the fog. Heart hammering, she peered over the sandbags and saw them, figures moving swiftly, shadows darting between trees, probing the bridgehead. "Contact east side," Halloran shouted, his voice slicing through the sudden chaos. Soldiers scrambled to positions, rifles raised, fingers trembling on triggers. Alina's pulse surged. She dropped her medkit beside her, wrenching out bandages and morphine, ready to treat the inevitable injuries while keeping herself alive. A bullet whizzed past her head, embedding itself in a wooden post. She flattened herself against the barricade, eyes scanning the darkness. The enemy was organized, moving in small squads with deadly precision. This wasn't just scouting, they were testing her team's resolve. "Ramirez," Private Jensen's panicked voice broke through. They're coming too fast." His hands shook as he gripped his rifle. Alina's gaze met his. "Breathe, Jensen, focus, don't let them see fear. Eyes sharp, trigger finger steady." Her voice was calm, firm, unyielding. Even under fire, she remained the anchor her team clung to. The first shots rang out across the bridge as the enemy reached the barricades. Splinters flew. A soldier screamed, clutching a bleeding shoulder. Alina rushed to him, pressing a field dressing over the wound, her hands steady despite the roar of gunfire. "I've got you," she murmured, applying pressure while instructing another soldier to cover her flank. Each second stretched into eternity. Every movement carried the weight of life or death. Halloran was shouting orders, rallying the troops, but his voice was almost drowned by the chaos. Alina noticed a shadow approaching the eastern barricade, too fast for one soldier to intercept. Without hesitation, she grabbed her sidearm and fired, forcing the enemy to retreat into the fog. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the surge of adrenaline, and she returned to stabilizing the wounded. The enemy regrouped and tried a flanking maneuver. Alina's mind raced. Mortar fire wasn't an option yet, there wasn't time. She signaled the soldiers to reinforce the weak points, moving between barricades like a ghost. "Shift left, hold the line, cover the medics." Her commands were precise, cutting through panic. Her team responded, their fear tempered by her presence. Amid the firefight, Alina glimpsed a young soldier pinned beneath a fallen barricade, rifle useless at his side. Without hesitation, she dashed across open ground, dodging incoming fire. Every step felt like it could be her last. She reached him, dragging him behind cover, applying a quick tourniquet to a deep leg wound. The soldier's eyes widened in disbelief. "Thanks, Captain," he whispered. Alina simply nodded. "Stay down, stay alive, that's your job now." Shots continued to echo across the bridge. The enemy was relentless, probing for weaknesses, trying to draw the defenders into mistakes. Alina moved between soldiers, treating wounds, shouting instructions, patching morale. The bridge, though small, was a battlefield stretching with tension and danger. Every plank might hold an enemy bullet. Every step might mean life or death. She noticed patterns in the enemy's movements. They moved deliberately, testing, learning. Alina's mind worked furiously, anticipating their next moves, signaling her team to adjust positions, reinforcing the exposed sectors. Her medkit became a lifeline and a shield, every bandage and dressing a silent defiance of death itself. The first skirmish escalated. A grenade landed too close to a barricade. Alina screamed for everyone to dive, pressing herself over the wounded. The explosion threw splinters and debris across the bridge, but miraculously no one suffered serious injury. Alina's heart raced. She helped the nearest soldier up, checking his head for concussions. "Stay sharp. We've survived the first wave. There will be more," she warned, eyes scanning the fog for the next threat. Private Jensen, still trembling, pointed to the shadows. They're circling the bridge," he stammered. Alina took a deep breath. "Then we circle back. Hold your ground. They won't break us tonight. Not if we move smart, not if we fight together." She directed squads to overlapping firing positions, turning fear into tactical advantage. Minutes dragged on like hours. Every crack of gunfire, every whistling bullet, every cry of pain heightened the tension. Alina moved like a ghost, weaving between sandbags, stabilizing soldiers, providing cover, issuing commands. Her dual role as nurse and commander became inseparable, each action a careful balance of protection and offense. By the time the first enemy squad retreated into the fog, silence fell again, heavy and unnatural. Soldiers sank to the ground, catching their breath, checking wounds, staring at the empty shadows. Alina moved along the bridgehead, inspecting barricades, counting the injured and reinforcing positions. The fog rolled across the river, hiding movement but also offering a brief reprieve. She knelt beside Private Jensen, inspecting a shallow bullet graze. "You did well," she said softly. "Next time, trust your instincts and your team." He nodded, swallowing hard. Around them, soldiers adjusted positions, readying themselves for the inevitable next wave. Alina knew this night was far from over. The first clash had tested them, but the true battle loomed. Alina's thoughts drifted briefly to the river below, moonlight glinting on the silver water. It seemed peaceful now, but she knew the calm was only temporary. Soon, the enemy would return stronger and more determined. And when they did, the bridge would become a crucible. She tightened the strap of her medkit, checking the supplies. Every bandage, every dose of morphine, every splint might be the difference between life and death. Her gaze swept across the bridge, taking in the exhausted but alert soldiers. Fear was etched into every face, but so was determination. Alina Ramirez stood among them, unwavering, a sentinel in the moonlit fog. She had faced death before, but tonight she would not just face it, she would control it. The first clash had ended, but the war for the bridge had only begun. And Alina knew she had to be ready for whatever the night would bring. The first clash had ended, but the night had only begun to reveal its fury. Mortar fire erupted upstream, shaking the bridge and sending splinters skittering across the planks. Alina pressed herself against a barricade, the vibrations rattling her teeth as smoke and fog intertwined into a ghostly haze. Somewhere on the eastern flank, a soldier cried out, clutching a bleeding arm. Alina dashed to him, kneeling beside the man and pressing a makeshift tourniquet to stop the blood. The world narrowed to the warmth of his blood on her gloves, the thundering explosions, and the knowledge that the enemy would not relent. From the darkness, enemy squads moved with lethal precision, flanking the bridgehead. Their footsteps were almost inaudible on the wet planks, but Alina's trained ears caught the subtle shifts in air and shadow. She barked orders to her soldiers, directing them to rotate positions and create overlapping fields of fire. "Hold your ground. Cover the medics. Don't let them flank us." Her voice was sharp, slicing through the chaos like a blade. A volley of gunfire erupted from the eastern embankment. Sandbags exploded in a shower of mud and wood, and a soldier went down, screaming as bullets tore into his shoulder. Alina lunged forward, dragging him behind cover, applying field dressing and stabilizing his vitals. Around her, the night was a symphony of violence, flashes of rifle fire, the clatter of falling debris, and the distant roar of artillery. Yet she moved with uncanny composure, weaving through the chaos, a figure of calm amid the storm. A group of enemy fighters surged toward the center of the bridge, intent on breaching the barricades. Alina grabbed her rifle, firing in short, precise bursts. Each shot counted, each breath was measured. She shifted between covering the medics and holding the line herself, her dual role blending into a singular mission: survival. The soldiers rallied around her presence, their fear tempered by her courage. They fired with renewed determination, pushing the enemy back a few meters. But she knew the real test was far from over. Smoke and fog curled along the bridge like living shadows. Explosions rocked the structure, shaking planks loose, and the sound of splintering wood filled the air. Alina's heart raced, but her mind stayed razor-sharp. She counted her wounded, assessed their injuries, and allocated medics accordingly. One soldier needed a splint, another a morphine injection. Every second mattered, and mistakes could mean death. She was a nurse, a warrior, and a leader, all in one, and each role demanded total precision. The enemy pressed relentlessly. Explosions erupted along the western side, and a soldier screamed as a mortar shell landed near his feet. Alina dived beside him, pressing her body against his to shield him, feeling the concussive force ripple through her. She applied a tourniquet to his mangled leg, murmuring reassurances as the chaos raged around them. The bridge, once a simple strategic point, had become a crucible of fire, smoke, and human endurance. Every plank, every barricade, every life mattered. Halloran shouted from the center barricade, rallying soldiers to push back another surge. Alina moved swiftly between positions, stabilizing the wounded, loading rifles for those too injured to fire, and directing soldiers to cover flanks. Her actions were a choreography of survival. One wrong move could mean disaster, but she moved like a conductor of the battlefield, orchestrating courage amid terror. A sudden scream pierced the night. Alina spun, spotting an enemy soldier attempting to leap onto the bridge from a side embankment. She fired, hitting him in the shoulder, and he fell into the fog below. Another threat neutralized, but the stress tightened her chest. Every encounter was a reminder that death was never far, that luck could turn in a heartbeat. Yet she pressed on, driven by duty and instinct. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Smoke stung her eyes, adrenaline coursed through her veins, and the cries of the injured rang in her ears. But Alina never faltered. She patched wounds with one hand while firing with the other, her body moving on sheer determination. Soldiers began to take notice, drawing courage from her resolve. The bridge, though battered and scarred, held firm. The enemy had tested them, but Alina had ensured they survived the night's first true siege. A young private, trembling, pointed toward the fog-shrouded embankment. "Captain, they're regrouping, coming again." Alina's gaze hardened. She didn't flinch. "Then we'll be ready. Every barricade, every weapon, every bandage counts. Hold your line, cover each other, watch your flanks." Her voice was a beacon of authority and calm, anchoring the soldiers amid the chaos. The enemy's retreat was temporary. Alina knew they would return, stronger, smarter, more ruthless. She adjusted barricades, reinforced weak points, and checked on her medics. Each step, each decision, each act of courage strengthened the line. The bridge wasn't just a structure, it was a lifeline, a symbol of resistance, and tonight it depended entirely on Alina Ramirez. By the end of the night's first major assault, the bridge remained intact, though battered and scarred. Soldiers leaned against sandbags, breathing heavily, wiping sweat and blood from their faces. Alina moved among them, offering reassurance, checking injuries, and reinforcing positions. Her body ached, her hands were raw, but she remained vigilant. The first clash had proven their strength, but it had also made one truth painfully clear. The enemy would not relent, and the bridge would demand every ounce of courage, skill, and determination they could muster. As dawn's first hints of light touched the horizon, Alina paused for a brief moment, looking across the river. The bridge still stood, but the night was far from over. She tightened her gloves, adjusted her medkit, and readied herself for the battles yet to come. Somewhere in the fog, the enemy lurked, planning their next strike. And Alina Ramirez would be waiting, ready to fight, ready to heal, ready to lead. Night deepened, swallowing the river and bridge in a thick, ghostly fog. The faint moonlight barely illuminated the worn planks beneath Elena Ramirez's boots. Her body ached from hours of firefights, but there was no time to rest. The first enemy probe had been repelled, but she knew better than to believe in reprieve. Darkness amplified every sound, the creak of a plank, the whisper of wind, even the soft shuffle of enemy movement hidden in the mist. Elena crouched behind a sandbag barricade, inspecting her medkit. Bandages were running low, morphine nearly gone, but she would make do. Every resource had to count. She glanced at her soldiers, faces pale in the moonlight, weapons trembling in tired hands. "Focus. Eyes sharp, heart steady," she whispered, moving along the bridge to reinforce weak points. Panic could kill faster than bullets, and she would not let it. A faint metallic glint caught her attention near the eastern support beam. She froze, breath held. A wire barely visible snaked along the timber, a tripwire. Her pulse jumped. Explosives, sabotage. If detonated, the bridge could collapse in seconds. She signaled to Halloran, who immediately understood. "Everyone fall back 5 meters," he barked. Soldiers scrambled, covering their heads as Elena carefully cut the wire, neutralizing the threat. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced. One slip 1 second too late, and dozens would die. The enemy pressed forward, using the fog as cover. Figures emerged suddenly from the mist, rifles raised. Elena fired her sidearm, forcing one back into the shadows. She moved with precision, stabilizing a wounded soldier as bullets hissed past her. Around her, explosions shook the bridge, splintering planks and scattering debris. She kept herself low, calculating every movement. Her mind functioned like a machine, dividing attention between the wounded, the advancing enemy, and the structural integrity of the bridge itself. A scream cut through the fog. Elena spun, spotting a young private pinned under debris from a fallen barricade. Enemy fire was cutting across the bridge like a whip, but she ignored the danger, diving across the open planks to reach him. She lifted the heavy timber, pulling him to safety, and applied a tourniquet to a deep gash in his thigh. "You'll live," she assured him, though her own breathing was ragged. Around them, the enemy advanced relentlessly, yet she did not flinch. Halloran's voice called out, "Enemy reinforcements coming from the west. Barricade that flank." Elena sprinted across the bridge, moving sandbags into place, positioning medics and shoring up structural weaknesses. Her presence inspired the soldiers around her. Where panic threatened to take hold, her calm authority restored order. They began firing in coordinated bursts, forcing the enemy to pause and regroup. The fog became a deadly cloak for both sides, but Elena saw through it, tracking shadows, listening to the subtle whispers of movement. Moments later, a soldier pointed toward the southern embankment. "Captain Wire's explosives." Elena didn't hesitate. She darted toward the threat, moving with a dancer's precision amid gunfire and debris. She cut the wires one by one, her hands steady despite the adrenaline and fear. The bridge trembled under the impact of enemy shells, but it held. Her soldiers, watching her courage, found renewed strength. For them, she was not just a nurse or a captain, she was the heart of the defense. Another explosion shook the western side, throwing Elena and a wounded soldier to the ground. Splinters rained down like deadly hail. She crawled to him, quickly checking for life-threatening injuries, applying bandages and urging him to remain calm. Every second counted. Every breath was precious. Around her, gunfire continued, mortars fell, and enemy voices echoed in the fog. Yet Elena moved like a force of nature, her dual role as healer and warrior inseparable. The enemy pressed harder, using darkness and confusion to their advantage. They tried to infiltrate the bridge, sending small squads to bypass barricades and attack from behind. Elena anticipated their moves, signaling soldiers to intercept, firing over barricades when necessary. Every step she took was calculated. She checked every corner, every plank, every shadow. The bridge was a battlefield stretching under the moon, and she was its unwavering sentinel. Despite exhaustion, Elena continued moving, tending to the wounded, reinforcing positions and maintaining morale. Soldiers followed her lead, taking courage from her steadfast determination. Fear and chaos swirled around them, but she remained calm, a lighthouse in the storm. She whispered reassurances, applied tourniquets, and gave precise commands, orchestrating a defense that balanced survival with tactical necessity. Hours passed, and the first hints of enemy fatigue became visible. Their movements slowed, hesitated, and they retreated briefly into the fog, regrouping. Alina didn't allow herself relief. She reinforced weak points, checked medkits, and prepared her soldiers for the next assault. She moved among them, offering words of encouragement and ensuring that every soldier remained focused. The bridge, battered and scarred, was still standing. As dawn approached, fog still clung to the river, but Alina's mind remained sharp. She paused briefly, surveying the bridge, the exhausted soldiers, and the debris from the night's chaos. The first night attack had tested their courage, strength, and willpower. Alina Ramirez had led, healed, and fought, holding her team together when survival seemed impossible. The night's danger was not over. The enemy would return with renewed strength. But for now, she allowed herself a breath, a fleeting moment of calm before the storm resumed. The bridge stood as a testament to her courage, her skill, and the unwavering spirit of her unit. The river below whispered in the darkness, but Alina's resolve burned bright. She would face whatever the enemy brought next, ready to heal, fight, and lead, even when the night seemed endless. The battle for the bridge had only just begun. The radio crackled once, then went dead. Silence replaced it, heavy and suffocating. Alina Ramirez's stomach sank. Command had been cut off. No reinforcements, no guidance, no word from headquarters. The bridge, already battered, was now isolated. Every decision would fall to her. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Fear was natural, but hesitation would be fatal. "Captain Ramirez," Sergeant Halloran said, voice tight, "we can't reach anyone. We're on our own." Alina nodded. Her eyes swept across the exhausted soldiers scattered along the bridge. Some were shaken, hands trembling over rifles. Others stared blankly, drained from hours of near-constant battle. Panic was creeping in like a poisonous fog. She clenched her fists and stepped to the center, raising her voice. "Listen to me, we hold this bridge. No retreat, no surrender. Every barricade, every weapon, every bandage counts. Follow my orders and watch each other's backs. Fear is the enemy now." The soldiers perked up slightly, but tension still rippled through their ranks. Alina moved among them, inspecting positions, checking weapons, reinforcing barricades. She distributed remaining medkits, ensuring each medic had enough supplies to treat multiple casualties. Every action she took was calculated. Resource management now mattered as much as firepower. From the fog, distant footsteps approached. The enemy had regrouped after the first clash, moving in coordinated waves. Their assault would be relentless, and Alina knew it. She barked commands, her voice cutting through the chaos. "East flank, hold. West barricade, cover fire. Medics, stay behind cover and triage. Halloran, take the center barricade and keep them from breaking through." The first wave struck like a hammer. Gunfire erupted from both sides of the bridge, echoing over the river. Soldiers fired in unison, trying to hold back the enemy, but some faltered under the pressure. Alina ran to the trembling young private near the western edge. "Focus. Breathe. You've trained for this. Hold your ground or we all fall. Do you understand?" He nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. She patted his shoulder before moving on. The enemy pressed harder, exploiting gaps created by the uneven defenses. Explosions rocked the bridge as mortars impacted nearby. Planks splintered, sandbags toppled, and smoke filled the night. Alina dodged debris while dragging a wounded soldier to safety, stabilizing his leg and applying a field dressing. Every second was a test of endurance, every decision a calculation between life and death. She barked orders while firing her sidearm, covering gaps where soldiers had fallen. "Shift left. Hold fire until you see them. Don't waste bullets." Her team, inspired by her unwavering determination, responded immediately, forming an overlapping line of defense. Even the terrified recruits found courage in her example. The enemy's assault intensified. Small squads tried to flank, aiming to infiltrate the bridge from behind. Alina anticipated their movements, sending soldiers to intercept. She grabbed a rifle from a fallen comrade, firing short bursts, keeping enemy soldiers pinned behind cover. The duality of her role, nurse and soldier, blurred as adrenaline fueled every motion. A young corporal shouted from a barricade, "Captain, they're breaching the east side." Alina's heart jumped. She sprinted across open ground, dodging sniper fire and debris reaching the breach. She fired at the advancing enemy, then turned to stabilize two soldiers trapped behind a fallen barrier. "Get up, move with me," she shouted. Their eyes widened in disbelief, but her courage ignited their own. Together, they reinforced the barricade, buying precious seconds. Hours passed. The enemy never relented. Every wave of attackers tested the limits of stamina, courage, and willpower. Alina ran between positions, applying tourniquets, distributing ammo, giving commands, and firing when necessary. Her hands were raw, her body screaming from fatigue, but she pushed onward. She was the anchor, the thread holding the unit together when chaos threatened to unravel everything. Halloran approached, breathing heavily. "Captain, we can't hold them forever, they're too many." Alina didn't flinch. "Then we'll buy every second we can. Hold your line, treat the wounded. We fight smart or we die trying. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. Lead when I'm not there. Cover each other. We survive or no one does." The soldiers rallied, inspired by her calm authority. Even the newest recruits steadied their rifles, bracing for the next assault. Alina moved among them, whispering words of encouragement, applying field dressings and shoring up barricades. Every small act mattered. Every soldier saved could return to the fight. As the enemy prepared for another wave, Alina took a brief moment to assess her medkits, ammunition, and barricades. Supplies were dwindling, but determination surged. She looked at the exhausted faces around her, realizing that leadership wasn't about orders alone. It was about example, courage, and relentless focus. From the fog, the enemy charged. Alina fired, then ran to a collapsed barricade, pulling a wounded soldier to cover. Another grenade landed nearby, throwing her to the ground. Splinters tore at her jacket, but she pushed herself up, dragging the injured behind a barricade. Around her, soldiers fired in unison, inspired by her fearless example. The night stretched on, every second a battle against fear, fatigue, and the enemy's relentless assault. Alina Ramirez, isolated, outnumbered, and exhausted, became the unwavering center of the bridge's defense. Her courage, clarity, and resourcefulness inspired her soldiers to fight on, to hold their ground despite the impossible odds. As dawn approached, smoke and fog began to thin, revealing the battered but intact bridge. The enemy had been pushed back temporarily, but Alina knew this night had tested them all. Communications were still down, reinforcements still hours away, and every soldier bore fresh wounds. Yet she moved among them, stabilizing the injured, reinforcing barricades, and preparing for the next wave. Leadership, she realized, was not just about orders. It was about presence, courage, and the ability to inspire when hope seemed fleeting. The bridge was still standing, and Captain Alina Ramirez, though weary and bloodied, stood at its center, a beacon of determination, calm, and unyielding will. The night's true test was far from over, but under her command the soldiers would survive to face it. The enemy's assault showed no mercy. Smoke and fog clung to the bridge, muting the shouts and gunfire into an almost surreal haze. Captain Alina Ramirez's muscles screamed with exhaustion, her clothes soaked in sweat and blood. Yet she moved with relentless determination. Every second counted, every decision could mean life or death. A cry rang out across the western barricade. Alina spun, spotting Private Lewis pinned beneath a fallen plank, a deep wound in his thigh. Bullets whizzed past, but she didn't hesitate. Sprinting across open planks, dodging incoming fire, she reached him. Her gloved hands were steady as she dragged him behind cover, applying a tourniquet. "Stay with me, Lewis. You're going to make it," she whispered. His wide, terrified eyes reflected raw pain, yet her calm authority anchored him. Around them, the bridge was chaos incarnate. Mortar shells slammed into planks, splintering wood and throwing dust and debris into the fog. Enemy squads moved with terrifying precision, exploiting every opening. Soldiers fired in overlapping lines, but numbers favored the attackers. Alina, undeterred, moved like a shadow between barricades, administering aid, reinforcing positions, and providing cover fire when necessary. A young corporal, clutching a rifle with shaking hands, looked to her in panic. "Captain, he's hit. What do we do?" "First stabilize him, then cover the line. Split-second decisions save lives," Alina replied, applying a field dressing to a bleeding arm. She assessed injuries with lightning speed: who could be treated immediately, who needed morphine, and who required a splint to survive the night. Every triage choice weighed heavy. One mistake could cost a life. Suddenly, a grenade landed near the eastern barricade, throwing Alina to the ground. Pain lanced through her side from the impact, but she ignored it. Another soldier lay exposed, screaming for help. Crawling toward him under sniper fire, Alina lifted him behind cover, bandaging a shrapnel wound in seconds. Her hands were bloodied and raw, but her mind remained laser-focused. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Courage was the only choice. The enemy's pressure intensified. They were learning from each failed attack, probing weaknesses with each movement. Alina anticipated their maneuvers, repositioning soldiers to cover gaps, reinforcing barricades, and ensuring medics were protected. She became both shield and sword, healer and warrior, orchestrating a defense that balanced survival with lethal precision. Private Jensen, still trembling from the first night, pointed to a shadow slipping through the fog. "Captain, they're coming behind us." Alina didn't flinch. She sprinted toward the threat, dragging a wounded corporal along with her. Bullets ripped through planks around her, splinters showering her like needles. She fired her sidearm at the advancing enemy, forcing them back into the fog. Then, without pause, she stabilized the wounded, checking vitals and applying dressings. Around her, soldiers drew courage from her example. Panic subsided as they focused on their tasks, firing with purpose and precision. Alina's dual role had inspired a resilience that seemed almost impossible under such dire circumstances. The bridge was battered, but it held. Each life she saved, each barricade she reinforced, was a defiance of death itself. Hours dragged on. Alina moved from soldier to soldier, from barricade to barricade, administering aid and issuing commands. Her body screamed in protest, burning muscles, bruises, exhaustion, but she pressed on. Every tourniquet applied, every wound bandaged, every soldier reassured was a lifeline. She refused to pause, knowing that a single moment of hesitation could mean disaster. The enemy launched another coordinated assault. Small squads tried to flank the northern edge, while the center faced concentrated fire. Alina fired with deadly precision, then turned to assist a medic pinned down by shrapnel. Together, they stabilized 3 soldiers, patching wounds with meticulous care while under fire. Her breath came in ragged bursts, but her mind remained razor-sharp, calculating every risk, every opportunity, every action needed to preserve life. A young private cried out for help, his leg trapped under debris. Alina dropped her rifle and ran across the planks, dodging sniper fire and splintering wood. She lifted the plank, freeing him, and quickly applied a tourniquet. His tear-streaked face looked up at her in awe. "Captain, thank you," he whispered, voice trembling. Alina only nodded, moving on to the next threat. There was no time for glory, only survival, only duty. The enemy pressed relentlessly, but Alina never wavered. Her presence was a lighthouse in the storm of violence, her courage contagious. Soldiers who had been on the verge of panic steadied, returning fire and holding the line. Her medkit, once a simple collection of supplies, became a symbol of hope, each bandage a stand against despair. As dawn's first light touched the fog, the intensity of the enemy's assault waned. Exhaustion weighed on every soldier, but Alina remained vigilant. She continued tending the wounded, checking barricades, and reinforcing positions. Sweat, blood, and grime coated her body, but she pressed on. Every life saved, every inch of bridge held, was a testament to her courage and resilience. By the time the enemy withdrew, temporarily beaten back by fatigue and loss, the bridge was battered but intact. Alina's soldiers were bloodied, bruised, and exhausted, yet they stood. Her hands were raw from applying tourniquets, her muscles screamed in protest, and her mind was a storm of exhaustion, but she had fulfilled her duty. The night's battle had demanded everything, her skill, her courage, her heart, and she had given it without hesitation. Alina Ramirez stood at the center of the bridge, looking at the wounded soldiers she had saved, the barricades she had reinforced, and the enemy's retreating shadows. The night had tested them all, demanding courage, endurance, and sacrifice. She had been a nurse, a warrior, and a leader, and her actions had kept the bridge from falling. The first light of dawn illuminated the river below, silver and still, reflecting a battle-weary but victorious line of soldiers. The bridge, though scarred and battered, remained standing, and Captain Alina Ramirez, exhausted but unbroken, had proven that heroism was not about glory. It was about relentless devotion. The first hints of dawn touched the river, silver glinting on the water as fog began to lift. Alina Ramirez, exhausted and bloodied, kept her eyes on the horizon, scanning for enemy movement. The night's relentless assault had tested every soldier to their limits, but the first rays of light brought a flicker of hope. The enemy's momentum was faltering, their attacks growing hesitant, sporadic. Alina moved along the bridge, checking barricades and ensuring wounded soldiers were stabilized. Her hands shook from fatigue, yet her mind remained sharp. Every detail mattered: ammunition, positioning, morale. Each soldier she passed offered a tired nod, inspired by her unwavering presence. "We're holding," she murmured quietly, almost to herself, "and we'll survive this." A faint rumble in the distance drew her attention. Reinforcements, or another enemy maneuver. She squinted toward the riverbank. Silhouettes of approaching figures moved steadily across the terrain. Her battalion's reinforcements were arriving. Relief surged through her, but there was no time for celebration. The bridge was still under threat, and every second counted. Halloran approached, leaning heavily on his rifle. "Captain, we did it. They're pulling back." Alina's jaw tightened. "Temporarily, don't lower your guard. We reinforce, cover the injured, and stay ready. This bridge is still our lifeline." Enemy scouts still lurked in the fog, probing weak points. Alina directed her soldiers to cover each flank while she stabilized the remaining wounded. A medic crouched beside a private, whispering reassurances as he applied a dressing to a gaping shoulder wound. Alina checked over her shoulder, ensuring that every position remained defensible. The night had shown her the fragility of survival, and she would not repeat mistakes. With reinforcements approaching, she coordinated a counterattack. Squads A and B moved to the east side and pushed the remaining enemy back across the river. "Cover fire ready," she ordered. Soldiers, still exhausted but inspired by her courage, obeyed. Bullets tore through the fog as the young recruits and seasoned veterans alike took positions for a coordinated push. Alina herself led a small team down the center of the bridge, firing in precise bursts, forcing enemy scouts to retreat. Amid the chaos, a grenade landed near the northern barricade. Alina dove forward, shielding a wounded corporal, absorbing the blast against her side. Pain seared through her body, but she pressed on, dragging the soldier behind cover. Her determination was a lifeline for the exhausted men and women around her. One by one, soldiers rallied, driving the enemy back, reclaiming lost positions and securing the bridge's flanks. As sunlight broke fully over the horizon, the fog lifted, revealing the full extent of the battle. The bridge was battered, planks splintered, sandbags torn, smoke still curling into the morning air, but it remained standing. Soldiers staggered along its length, some tending to the wounded, others scanning for stragglers. Alina moved among them, ensuring everyone was accounted for, their injuries stabilized and morale maintained. She knelt beside Private Jensen, inspecting a shallow gunshot wound. "You held your line," she said softly. "You survived. That's what matters." His face broke into a weak, exhausted smile. Around them, the unit was beginning to breathe again, though each soldier bore the scars of the night. Enemy forces retreated to the tree line across the river, regrouping for what might have been another assault. Alina observed them silently, noting their numbers and formation. Her team, though battered, had proven their resilience. The bridge had not fallen. The strategic point they defended had remained in Allied hands. Reinforcements finally reached the bridgehead, their arrival signaling a shift in momentum. Soldiers brought additional medkits, ammunition, and heavy weapons. Alina coordinated with the new arrivals, integrating them into defensive positions and ensuring that the wounded were evacuated safely. Even amidst exhaustion, she remained the fulcrum of the bridge's defense. Her presence reassured the soldiers that leadership was still steady, reliable, and fearless. Amid the relief, Alina allowed herself a rare moment to reflect. The bridge, once quiet and seemingly insignificant, had become a crucible of courage and endurance. The night had demanded heroism, quick thinking, and selfless sacrifice. Soldiers who had never fired in anger before had become warriors. Medics had moved with precision under fire. And Alina herself had been tested beyond measure, balancing the roles of nurse, fighter, and leader simultaneously. As dawn continued to illuminate the river, she scanned the bridge once more. Every scar, every splintered plank, every bandage applied told a story of survival and resilience. She moved to the center, raising her head high. "This bridge stands because of you," she said, voice carrying across the river. Soldiers looked to her, some with tears, some with exhausted smiles, all recognizing that their unity and courage had held the line. The enemy's retreat gave them a temporary reprieve, but Alina knew this was only the beginning. The bridge had survived the night's fury, but vigilance was still essential. She instructed medics to prepare the wounded for evacuation, reinforced barricades, and ensured that ammunition was distributed evenly among the soldiers. Even in the first light of morning, she maintained focus. Exhausted but unbroken, Alina Ramirez stood at the center of the bridge, the sun casting long golden shadows across the planks. Her uniform was bloodied, her hands raw from bandages and tourniquets, but her resolve remained intact. She had faced death and chaos head-on, orchestrating a defense that saved lives and held the strategic point against overwhelming odds. The river below gleamed in the morning light, serene and oblivious to the night's violence. Yet the bridge remained a monument to courage, strategy, and unyielding determination. Alina looked at her soldiers, each one battered but alive, and felt a surge of pride. They had survived together, and the dawn was a symbol of their resilience. Though the enemy might regroup, and battles would continue, for now the bridge was theirs. And under Captain Alina Ramirez's leadership, they had proven that courage, quick thinking, and unwavering resolve could withstand even the darkest night. The morning sun bathed the river in gold, casting long shadows across the scarred planks of the bridge. Silence replaced the chaos of the night, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the soft shuffle of soldiers checking their positions. Captain Alina Ramirez stood at the center, surveying the bridge she had defended with every ounce of skill, courage, and resolve. The battle was over, for now, but its mark on both the bridge and its defenders was permanent. Around her, soldiers tended to one another, their hands shaking as they wrapped bandages, applied splints, and checked vitals. The medics moved methodically, though exhaustion weighed heavily on every movement. Alina knelt beside a young private whose arm was swollen from a gunshot wound. "We've got you," she said, pressing a dressing over the injury. His eyes filled with gratitude and relief, but Alina only nodded, silently urging him to focus on survival. She had learned long ago that words of comfort mattered as much as bullets and bandages. The bridge itself bore the scars of relentless combat. Planks were splintered, sandbags torn apart, and scorch marks ran along the beams from explosives. Yet it remained standing, a testament to the determination of those who had defended it. Alina's gaze swept across the river, reflecting on the night's events. The enemy had been fierce, coordinated, and ruthless, but they had failed to claim the strategic chokepoint. Every bullet fired, every barricade reinforced, and every life saved had contributed to this hard-earned victory. Halloran approached, his face grim but relieved. "Captain, we held it, against impossible odds." Alina nodded, allowing herself a brief breath. Yes, we did. But remember, this isn't the end. Reinforcements will need to secure the bridge fully and the wounded need evacuation. Our job continues until every soldier is accounted for. Her mind shifted to the soldiers around her, some young, barely out of training, others seasoned veterans. They had faced the full fury of an enemy assault, survived under extreme pressure, and relied on her leadership to navigate the chaos. Alina had seen courage blossom in the most unexpected places. Private Jensen holding his position despite fear, medics stabilizing critical injuries amid sniper fire, and even herself pushing beyond the limits of exhaustion. She moved to the wounded along the center of the bridge. A corporal groaned from a fractured leg, another private's chest rose shallowly under a bandaged wound. Alina worked tirelessly, applying dressings, adjusting splints and reassuring the frightened. Her hands were bloodied and raw, her uniform torn, but her focus remained absolute. Every life mattered, every action could tip the balance between survival and loss. Above the river, helicopters began to appear on the horizon, transporting additional reinforcements and evacuation teams. Alina coordinated their landing zones, directing medics and soldiers alike. Keep the wounded stable, load priority first, cover the flanks, she commanded, voice firm yet measured. Each instruction reinforced her authority and kept the chaotic scene organized. As the first evacuation helicopters touched down, Alina paused for a moment, surveying the bridge she had defended. It was more than just a tactical point. It was a symbol of endurance, courage, and leadership under fire. Every scar on its wood, every dent in a sandbag, told a story of perseverance against overwhelming odds. She realized that battles were not just fought with weapons, but with resolve, ingenuity, and unwavering human spirit. Soldiers began boarding the helicopters, their injuries attended to, morale bolstered by the survival of the bridge and the leadership that had guided them. Alina helped steady those who struggled to walk, offering support without faltering. Her presence reassured them that despite the horrors they had endured, hope still existed. Survival was a collective effort, and her guidance had been central to it. Halloran joined her once more, nodding toward the river. The enemy's retreating. For now, at least, the bridge is secure. Alina exhaled slowly, allowing herself the faintest relief. For now, she echoed. Her mind remained alert. She knew that peace was temporary, that war was cyclical, and that vigilance was never optional. Yet she also allowed herself to acknowledge the magnitude of what had been accomplished. The bridge had held. Her soldiers had survived. Lives had been saved. She looked around at the exhausted faces, recognizing the quiet strength that had carried them through the night. Even those who had trembled with fear had found courage, and those who had doubted themselves had proven indispensable. Alina Ramirez realized that leadership was not about invulnerability. It was about guiding others through the darkness, giving them the tools, confidence, and support to endure. The morning air carried the faint scent of river water and gunpowder, a reminder of the struggle that had just passed. Alina adjusted her medkit strap, checking supplies one last time before she joined the evacuation effort. Her body ached, bruises throbbed, and exhaustion pulled at every muscle, yet she moved with quiet determination, ensuring no one was left behind. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the bridge in warm light, the river shimmered peacefully, belying the violence it had witnessed overnight. Alina stood at its center, surveying the scene with pride and solemnity. The bridge had survived, her soldiers had endured, and the enemy had been repelled. She had fought, healed, and led through the crucible of night, proving that courage and determination could defy even the most relentless adversary. Finally, as the last helicopter lifted off with the wounded, Alina allowed herself a rare, long breath. The battle was over, the bridge remained intact, and her soldiers had survived. The night had tested them all, but under her leadership, they had emerged alive, stronger, and resilient. Captain Alina Ramirez looked across the river one last time, her eyes scanning the horizon. The bridge stood as a monument, not just to strategy or position, but to courage, sacrifice, and endurance. She had faced the darkness and chaos, saved lives against impossible odds, and emerged as the unwavering heart of the Bridgehead. For her and her soldiers, the dawn was more than a new day. It was a testament to human resilience, courage, and the unyielding will to survive.